Welcome back to Slavery in the African American Story, and also happy Black History Month. You are magnificent, you are amazing, and don't forget that Black history is American history. And in particular, when it comes to slavery, that is European American history. So last time we stopped on the door, I think. Regardless, we are going to finish this chapter, talk about the reading comprehension questions, and start on our next chapter, okay? Then let's think about this. All right. So, slavery was big business. Obviously, that's why it went on for as long as it did. So, the transatlantic slave trade made many Europeans rich. The slave trading nations include France, Britain, Spain, the Netherlands, and Portugal. In the beginning, Portugal led the pack. Portuguese slavers ultimately captured and enslaved nearly 4 million Africans, taking the lion's share of the captured to Brazil, which was a receiving station for over 3 million enslaved Africans. I can't even think of 3 million things like have a tangible idea of 3 million things. And people do this all the time when it comes to like wealth and like Bezos and stuff like that. 3 million tangible items, right? What that looks like. I can't even imagine for 3 million people. I can't even imagine. That was such a horrific time. And for the everything happens for a reason, people. Go ahead and DM me what the reason you think is. That it's everything happens for a reason and God's plan and all of that, because all I see is brutality and suffering needlessly for the greed and inhumanity of others. But the British were not too far behind, transporting 3 million kidnapped Africans to North America and the Caribbean to provide labor for the growing colonies. British slave owners, both rich and those of more modest means, used enslaved people to amass wealth for their businesses ventures abroad. The Dutch West India Company quickly outpaced Portugal in the slavery business. One of the most profitable 16th and 17th century trading companies was the Dutch West India Company, established by the Netherlands, also known as West India Company. The international company had one primary goal: to quash the military and economic might of its competitors, Spain and Portugal. To do this, the Dutch had to beat both nations in the race to colonize new lands by setting up trading posts on the west coast of Africa and in Brazil, in the Caribbean, and alongside the Hudson River in what is today New York City. Eventually, the company held a monopoly on the world's trading routes. For the better part of 2 centuries, the Dutch West India Company led the trade of enslaved Africans throughout the world. However, competition in the lucrative industry was fierce, and as a result, the Dutch West India Company also fought many battles to maintain its monopoly and to protect the financial interests of the Netherlands. The Dutch didn't profit from the sale of slaves, however. They used them to work in the Dutch colonies in the Caribbean, such as Curaçao, and the settlements such as the Dutch Guinea and the Suriname and Guyana in the South American mainland. The Dutch establishment, New Amsterdam. The Dutch used both free and enslaved Africans along with German and English workers when they planted their flag and established New Amsterdam on the island of the indigenous inhabitants, the Nape, called the Manhattan as it's known today. At first, it looked like the Dutch and the Lenape might live together peacefully, sharing the land and trading goods like beads, guns, and wool. The Dutch are even said to have purchased Manata from the Lenape. However, the Lenape didn't have a concept for owning land. Instead, they thought they were merely selling the Dutch the right to use their land. But that relationship quickly went bad when the Dutch built a huge wall to prevent the Lenape access to their land their ancestors settled on over 6,000 years before. Tensions between the Dutch and the Lenape went from bad to worse as the Dutch encroached upon more of their land and even tried to tax them. The audacity, the caucasity. The bad blood between the two groups erupted into a full-blown battle known as the Kief's War, in which many on both sides lost their lives. Dutch New Amsterdam became New York with slave labor. So one of the things that I've learned in my studies, in my learning journey, in my doing the work is that growing up, we are presented with this idea that the South was bad and the North was more progressive, right? And the North was on the right side of history. And the reality is that they were two sides of the same coin, two wings of the same bird, much like our voting system. Two sides of the same bird, two sides of the same coin. Neither one of them was good. Both have considerable flaws, and people deserve better than what either one of them has to offer. North and South, Democratic or Republican. So I just wanted to interject that. Let's continue. In 1644, New Amsterdam was taken from the Dutch by British opponents, who changed its name to New York after the Duke of York. 17th century New York was nothing like today's bustling metropolis. The city that it became was made possible by diverse labor force of Europeans of different backgrounds, along with freed and enslaved Africans, who not only built it out of the wilderness, but also provided support for the British colonists' way of life. Enslaved Africans cut the timber, cleared and cultivated the land through farming, and built the houses and roads which would provide infrastructure. They were also forced to fight to protect the colony when necessary. Just a century later, enslaved Africans and African Americans made up 1/5 of New York's population. New York played a mammoth role in the shipping and trade of textiles, food, cotton, business made possible by booming slave labor in the South. Let's think about this. 1. Why were European slave traders successful in capturing and enslaving so many African people? 2. Did you know that slavery still slavery still exists today? Why do you think there isn't an international outcry about it? 3. The author William Faulkner wrote, "The past is never dead. It isn't even past." How can this quote help us understand how the legacy of slavery continues to shape American society to this day? So, I have some answers to this question, but I want to know your answers. So go ahead and type them down below, and I will do a follow-up visit later, and we'll discuss these questions together. So let me know what you think based on what we have read thus far and your collective knowledge thus far, and we will discuss them in a later episode. Thank you for joining me for our American history class, Slavery and the African American Story, and I will see you next time. All right. I love you. Bye-bye.